Okay, trying to be super gentle here. Oh, whoops. Oh man. Hello, welcome to the boat shed. In today's video, we're going to be going up on deck. I want to show you some of the plans that I have to fix that up in the short term. We're going to be cutting into some 35-year-old fiberglass panels, and I have a few questions that you might be able to help out with, so stick around for all of that. My name is John, and this boat right here is Antidote. Now, I am not a pro boat builder. I'm an engineer that's taking a break from that to pursue an old dream to fix up this sailboat and go sailing around the world. But now we've got a lot of work to do first. Lately, we've been working a lot in the anchor locker and on a forward bulkhead, and maybe more than some of you would like, and I can appreciate that. So let's freshen things up with something a little different. Just to make sure that I don't mess this up and accidentally include more anchor locker content in this episode, I've decided to enlist the help of my Roam marine monitor. So we disconnected this from the test bench down in the basement. We're gonna run it today on the battery power. I've got the GPS antenna here, and so we'll set the anchor alarm up to include most of the boat, but not the bow here. And now if I step into the anchor locker zone, perfect. So this is gonna work fine. Let's get to work now. So I have this covered just to protect it from UV light. The manufacturer tells me that the only problem with the foam is getting a little bit darker in UV, but all the same, to protect that and the epoxy, I have had that covered. This whole forward section is looking really good. We did this a while ago, as you might recall, but the only thing that I really need to do there is some minor fairing over some of the transitions from the different foams, but that's pretty much ready to take glass. So before I do that though, I want to build up the foam back here in this section, and before I do the foam there, I kind of want to take off the cover where I'm standing. If you've been watching for a while, you'll remember that when we pulled that section of the core up, we had a lot of wet plywood in there, and then eventually got back to balsa in these sections here. I'm pretty confident that all of this deck needs to get replaced. That's what my moisture meter readings tell me. Let me give you a more global idea of the plan here. So you've seen me tear off layers of glass and demolish old rotten wood core, so we're back to here once we've got the foam back in. Before covering this forward section of glass, I want to install the foam for the area just aft. Before that, I need to make some room by demoing the top skin and rotten core behind it. So it's going to keep going like this, sort of a game of rotten core whack-a-mole, until I hit the back of the boat. In the past, some of you have suggested that it might be faster to remove all of the deck core and top at once and replace it all. Now, it might be faster. I am a little nervous to do that, even just because of changing the shape of the deck and a few other reasons. I think we'll continue with this approach, and some of you will no doubt say this is a strange way to do things, and I don't completely disagree. If I was completely sane though, I wouldn't be doing any of this now, would I? So to get started on the coring of this section, we have this old hatch here, and that will bring me to the first of 3 questions that I have to poll the audience today. This is the section of molded glass that covers that hatch opening and provides a location for the hatch to screw into. Now, as you can see, it is still full of plywood pucks, which are wet and still falling apart. Now, initially when I removed this, some of you commented that I might be able to reuse this glass section, and I had my hopes for that as well, but I'm starting to have my doubts. If you come and take a look up here, you'll notice that there's actually some really big cracks developing between what would be the deck and then this molded piece. It's my understanding that all of the original Liberties had a deck mold with a flush hatch, so that this would not have been there, and it was only in the later models, maybe even just the last couple of boats, it might be that they just molded this piece and grafted it in to the original deck mold. There's such a clean break around this edge that it almost to me looks like this was added as a secondary thought and maybe not actually molded in to the deck. This is really disappointing construction for me to find. This is added to a list of a few things now that I'm not super keen on, but we will get to fixing on this boat. So my question to you is, do you think we should try to reuse this, take out the old core material and replace it with some foam? Or should we just build it up new, similar to its current design, or maybe even just get rid of that hatch altogether? And now you might have a question for me, and the answer is yes, my t-shirt is on inside out, but enough about that. Let's get to work tearing off that piece of deck. For this, we're gonna reach again for the fine cutting tool. This is their fiberglass cutting disc, and I really like this thing. It was a tip that I got from Andy at Boatworks today, and it works awesome. Dust control is great. It's not the fastest, but you can really control it, keep that dust under control. I'm gonna do this in a t-shirt today, and I'm not worried about getting all covered in fiberglass dust. So Really highly recommend it. We'll put a link in the description below. The only complaint I have is that it's not a universal mount. It only works on the fine tool, at least this version. Maybe there's an adapter that is available. I haven't researched that fully. If you know about that, put that in the comments because it would be great for everyone to be able to access that. So we've measured out the 2.5 inches that I want, so I'll get a good scarf back to the original glass. We're gonna cut this section out first and see what we've got. Here we go. Let's say hi to a couple of the new Patreon crew members that really help keep this channel humming along. If you're interested in some behind the scenes updates and ad-free videos, then you can check out the Patreon link in the description down below. The folks whose names are appearing on the screen now go the extra mile to keep this channel moving, and I couldn't do it without you. Thanks all so much. Back to the video. Pretty wet in there again. We seem to be stuck now on this prism opening. I think because it's installed with a bunch of goop, it almost looks like the teak seal, the TDS caulking. I think instead of trying to fight that and peel that apart and cutting everything right now, let's just buzz around that with the glass cutting tool so we can pull the rest of the glass off and then we can address that after. Overall, I'd say that piece came off easier than I was expecting. No surprise under here, it's completely soaked. Even though some of the wood looks okay, and there's even large sections where it was still bonded, the fiberglass actually tore off, or the resin maybe tore off, and the wood is intact. There's areas where I can just push my thumb straight into this and touch the bottom, dig out sections. So we have areas here of the coffee grounds, and then we have some areas that are more okay. But as with most of this, it's all coming out. Now I want to start digging this out. I have some concerns because everything we've worked on up until now was not a covered living space. In other words, the ceiling was just raw fiberglass. In here, there's the really nice wood panel treatment, and I don't want to bulldoze through here and tear off a bunch of screws that might be holding up into the old core to keep some of that headliner up. So that's a concern that I have. We're gonna carefully go through here and see if we can pull out some of this core, see if we find any screws poking up through it. I think we are going to find that, and well, we'll just cross that bridge when we get to it. If you're enjoying the video so far, why not take a second to hit that like button for me? It's right down there, and it's a cheap, free way to show this channel a little bit of love. I appreciate it very much. Back to the video. As I suspected and feared, there are some screws coming up from the underside of the deck. Yeah, that's unfortunate. So I don't want to bulldoze all these screws out because then nothing's holding that up potentially. So I at least want to drop some of this headliner down, probably in the head here. We're going to see if all this is fastened up to the underside of the fiberglass, which means other than just the screws, like is it glued or epoxied, something like that. Probably not epoxy, but you get the idea. If it's not, we're going to have to do that, and then we'll put everything back in, keep going with this. So it's an unfortunate discovery, probably not a huge surprise. Anyway, we carry on. We've run into 3 or 4 screws now, So going slow is probably a good idea here. Now the pry bar I was using, this has been working well at removing. I've sharpened it a little bit. I put a bit of an edge on it just because it was losing a bit of grip. So we'll see if this helps speed things up. It's the following day and things are drying out quite nicely here. Yesterday I took a few moisture readings and a couple of them were high. Now some of them have dried out as I would expect. Another one here is still showing the exact same amount. So I'm wondering if it's possible that these screws, which are in that vicinity, don't just let water in from the top, but they let water from the core into the structure below. It's really hot up here today. It's 90 up in the shed right now. Perfect opportunity to go down below and take a look at that headliner. So let's start pulling that out. Oh, got a little close there. This is what we're dealing with here in the head. And as you can see, the headliner treatment is really quite nice. This is that beadboard finish. If you watch Duracell, this is what Matt's trying to do with their boat when they're done. So I really like this as well. And this is all marine plywood that's been prepared in that fashion, so it's not MDF in this case. And I really want to keep it in good shape to reuse it. Now it's put up with a lot of teak trim. I'm hoping that when I pull the trim down, I'll be able to access some screws to pull down the boards. Now this is the same thing I have going throughout the whole boat. This is a bit of a test run because in the aft cabin we have a large headliner, very nice, with the same treatment, and I can see little spots where there are screws and not battens over them. They're going to be a challenge to take out, I think, but this is a good test run to see how well this comes down, if we can get it down. So we're taking off these teak trim pieces. I'm still a big fan of using the brad point drill and then a little small chisel. I happen to have this really tiny chisel. It's great for breaking out the bungs. So this way I'm able to clear a path to the likely Phillips head screw that's underneath. And then I also don't run the risk of pulling any of those fibers out around the side of the plug. Sometimes if you drive a screw in there to pull the plug out, if it's really well set in or maybe even epoxied in, it might pull off some of the surrounding wood. You don't really want to do that. So this is a great way to take them out clean. Of course, it takes a little bit longer, just like a lot of the things I do, but it gives you a really good finish. So that's how we're taking this down. Maybe you've got other ideas on how to do it. Go ahead and put those in the comments down below. All right, well there you go. One down, a few more to go. And this was put on with some sort of like, it almost feels like it's a flexible caulking. I don't know what it is, maybe 4200, something like that. It does break away, but it's not fun. That first piece off, you can see there's a little bit of damage here, but it would all be behind the trim. It's just another reason I want to try and be as careful as I can here. I did find another little screw hole here, and I think I see a few more filled holes. So we're gonna pull all those out, get all the screws out. I was able to get a knife tucked under here and pull this down a little bit, and it does wiggle just so slightly, so I don't think that the beadboard is glued to the wood supports above. Whew, that's good news, but it's not over yet. These teak headliner pieces have now been all removed from the forward head, and with the exception of one piece, they all came off pretty well. So this is the aft portion that goes around the hatch, and you'll see here that there is a little crack. It was starting to form, and I was stressing it and trying to be easy on it, but then it did completely break. Now it's probably easier to repair with a full break because I can now completely treat those edges, so we're gonna be just fine with that. But we'll wipe it with acetone. I have some epoxy that has a hardener that's quite old, so it's actually very dark, almost this exact color. So it's gonna match really nicely, and I think when it's all done, the only people that will know it's there are you and I. Now, all of these pieces will need to get refinished. For one thing, putting the bungs back in will involve sanding them flat, and it's just gonna be good to give them a new finish anyhow, so no big deal. There is some extra blistering you'll see on this piece. The heat gun might have gotten a little carried away here sometimes and just done a little bit of blistering. So maybe that's just a little pre-work on removing the varnish on some of these. Overall, I'm really happy. So I think I owe a lot of the credit there to the putty knife that I was using. And so as a result of using this really fine tool, I was able to avoid any damage to the woodworking. All the cabinetry looks really good. It almost looks like nothing ever happened to it, in fact. It's a great little tool. I prefer to use the flexible one to get in there, and these spring steel ones are actually a little thinner than if you were to get a stainless steel one, for example. So great little tool though. I do recommend a heat and the putty knife to get trim off, break old glue joints up very, very carefully and slowly. And I think I owe that tip to a guitar builder friend of mine that showed me that years and years ago. So if you're watching, thanks, Jay. So now looking around in the forward head, we don't have any more trim or anything holding us back from trying to get these headliners down. Let's take a look at getting those pulled down the rest of the way. After pulling out all the screws from this first center section, since they were covered with some sort of a hardened putty instead of a wood bung, when you drill them out, you still have a lot left inside the Phillips drive. It was very difficult to get out. I had to use a screw extractor. We wrestled them all free, and wouldn't you know it, let's roll back that earlier clip. So I don't think that the beadboard is glued to the wood supports above. Whew. Yeah, so 101 here in any kind of bow work is don't say stupid things like that, because they will come back to haunt you. And sure enough, this is thoroughly glued on, both layers. There's a layer of the beadboard, and then there's another layer of ply over that. All of it's glued and screwed together. And to get to the bracing that has the screws into the deck, you need to get all that off. So I think, although we were able to save the teak trim, I think it's a foolish economy to try to pull down the headliner intact. I'll do my best, but I think I'm gonna be conscious of the time I'm using, and probably will need to readdress that later. And maybe we'll do something different with the headliner. I don't really like that it's all permanently installed. If you have any ideas about that, I'd love to hear in the comments below. Maybe one reason that they like to permanently install a headliner like this is because it makes less creaking and squeaking. I don't know. I think this is a wood boat. It's gonna have lots of creaking. Anyway, I slice it. I like the idea of being able to drop the headliner so I can access things, run wires and things. So I don't really want to have it permanently installed. I think if I do that, future me will be very upset with me today. So anyway, we're gonna get back to work now, pulling the rest of the headliners down, being a little less careful. I know you guys don't want to see this for 15 more videos, so on we go. just like that, all these headliners are now down and in the workshop. As you saw there, the plans kind of changed as we went along, and that's sort of the way things go sometimes on these old boat projects, especially when you're learning as you go. Now these are going to be patterns for future me when we go to remake these and not go back in the boat like I had originally hoped for and planned at the beginning of this video. Now what did we find with those braces? Well, I guess that answers that. Yeah, so at least now I know how things were put together. So those were not glued in at all, and that gives me some things to think about as I go forward here. Some of the braces are in great shape and will definitely be used again, and others are a little more on the soft side and falling apart. So I'll probably be replacing these. Now going down the rest of the boat, will I be taking all the headliners down? I don't know yet, is the real answer there. I hope not to when I can avoid it. And I did think last night as I was mulling things over that perhaps I could drive some screws down from the top into these braces before I put the new core back in. So that might be one way to keep things waterproof, fasten things back into the original bracing structures without having to replace everything. Now, some of the ones that are rotten, it's not going to be as strong, obviously. But so anyway, let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. On the topic of rotten plywood, and sometimes it seems like that's all we talk about around here, there's something else I need to show you. Nope. I think it's time to turn this thing off. I would love to get your input on this bulwark situation. This is how I believe they're constructed. The deck and the hull are not overlapped at the top, but instead they're just butted together. And there has been a crack forming in areas over the years, and in some areas it is so large that I can put my entire thumb in it. So water can definitely get in there. Now fortunately, it appears to be tabbed on the bottom with a layer of glass, and then they filled the entire void with resin. Must have been the end of the day. There is one area that does not have resin in it, and that is because it is 1/2-inch plywood. So yes, there's a piece of plywood, as far as I can tell, running the entire length of both sides of the boat, 8 inches deep, 200 millimeters, and it's an old soggy plywood that's had water in it for a very long time. You can actually see the edge of it here inside this hawse pipe or cleat opening. So I really don't like that. It keeps me up at night. I know there isn't an easy way to do it. I'm just wondering if there is a way to do it that makes any sense at all. Maybe it's one of those things I just walk away from it and we live with it the way it is. I'd love to hear from you. So lots of requests for comments in this video. I read all the comments that you guys post. I appreciate all of them. The good, the not as good. It's all good information for me. So I'd love it if you keep leaving those comments for me. Let me know what you think of the project and how things are going. If you're new to the channel, I'd love it if you'd click that button right there. It'll get you caught up from the start. And if you'd like to subscribe to the channel, we'd love that. There's a button right there. See y'all next time. Let's freshen things up. We've now run into a couple of screws, I think 4 altogether. So I am going slow taking this off. And I'm sure some of you are screaming at the TV because of that.